Laid some canvas down on the floor. I've got the top unfolded laying on it. I've got paper underneath the vinyl window so I don't scratch it or try not to scratch it. And now we are on to step 6. Assemble top fabric on frame. It says remove the main bow from the passenger side only. Well, the bows are off the car. Insert top into the rear driver's side bows through the loop sewn into the top to hold it. Well, there are 2 bows on the main hoop. Is it the one that goes into the socket on the body, or is it the one that's on the hinge behind the main hoop? Step C, install the passenger side of the 2 rear top bows through the loops in the top. Be sure the 2 bows slide together in the center. Then step D, reinstall the 2 rear top bows on the car with the top fabric attached. Use 2 people for this step. Yes, I can see the need for 2 people. It's pretty unwieldy. You've got the steel rod sticking down. There is a chance of scratching the paint, but like I stated before, I usually work alone. I'm not going to have a helper, and I want to try to establish a procedure for putting the top on by myself. So what I've done is I've slipped a piece of rubber hose over the ends of the 2 main hoops so that while I'm trying to wangle this thing onto the top of onto the car, if I bump into something, I shouldn't scratch it. So, in looking at this, I believe that they're talking about the rear most hoop that goes through the loop in the fabric. The top is laid down inside out on the floor, so I'm going to slide that rear hoop through the sewn loop in the top fabric. Try to get it at least midway. Okay, now I'm at the middle. I can feel where the coupler is and my other rod. Now I'll try to get them engaged. All right, felt them slide together. I hear a click when I shove the 2 rods together, so they are engaged in the center. Now I have that little bail clip supplied. I'm gonna hook the main bow together and put the clip in with the flat side up, you could say. So it's shaped like this. And now let's see if we can move this over and get it onto the car. The instructions recommend having 2 people for this step, but I don't have 2 people. So I am going to grab the top, carry it over to the car. And I've got those bits of rubber hose over the ends of those down rods, so hopefully things won't scratch. And I've got that last hoop on the back side of the roll bar. Maybe I can use that rubber hose it over the lift-a-dot on the passenger side and the driver's side. So you got that little stub of rubber hose hooked on the lift-a-dot on both sides. Moved over to the passenger side. I'm going to remove that rubber hose. Slip the main tube into the ferrule. Remove the hose on this side. Get that into the ferrule. And try to get this fabric to flop over. We've got the top on the car. Next step, install the rest of the frame, the 2 side bows and the 2 front crossbows. Here's a little tip or trick. I have marked my crossbow parts with colored tape so that I know which side goes on which. And it makes it much easier to reassemble. I'm just thinking ahead when I'm dodging a rainstorm and I'm parked under an overpass trying to put this on by myself. I don't have to think. I go color to color to color. I think it works out pretty well. Next step, with all top bows in place and the top fabric installed on the frame, lay the front of the top fabric over the windshield. You may want to tape it in place. Now we can spread this out. That's the first time it's been on the car, laying on the frames. These last few minutes really reinforced to me on that you need to spend the time and make sure that the metal work, the top bows, the rods, fit properly, slide into place easily, and just click in without any fuss or muss. Again, I'm thinking it's starting to rain. I found an underpass or a gas station canopy, and I got to throw the top on by myself. And I just can't see fiddling and fighting ill-fitting framework. You just saw it. It clicks together. Throw it on and we're good. So invest the time and make sure that your framework fits on the car easily and without effort. The next step is to pull the top into position. Line up the sides of the top behind the doors. Locate the front of the sewn flange of the top even with the back of the door jamb on both sides of the car. What they're speaking of is this, and get it lined up with the back edge of the door opening. They're talking about this edge here, and they want this edge to be lined up with the rear edge of the door opening on the car. Something like this. The next part of step G is this photo shows the lift the dot installed so you can see the correct location of the snap. That is where they want the snap for that little front flange next to the door jamb. Basically, you will locate the lift the dot stud in the sewn top flange, mark with a marker or a slight cut over the stud on driver's and passenger side of the car. Step I, it is now time to punch the holes for the lift the dot snaps. So I am going to jockey things around, make a mark in this general area for my first lift the dot snap, and we'll go from there. Okay. I've got one of the backing discs for the lift the dot fastener, and looking at the photograph, I'm comparing the location of the snap in the photograph to where they want it placed in the fabric here. And since the backing disc is nearly the same size as the fastener itself, comparing to the photograph, I kind of want it equally spaced, and I'm going to compare that to where it lines up on my stud. You can only go in so far because you hit the main support rod, and they want it lined up with the edge of the door opening against the rod, lined up with the door opening, and you can feel the end of the stud. So I have a fabric marker here. So I am going to color in the top of the stud. That kind of approximates the photograph. In the photograph, they've got the stud shifted a little bit this way, which would shove it really tight in, but it induces a fold here. So I'm going to go to the other side and do the same. I'm over on the passenger side. I'm going to align, get my fabric up against that main hoop, align it with the body opening, find my lift the dot stud, and there's my placement. That winds up about 3/4 from the edge and about 3/8 from that edge. Compare that to the other side. I'm about a 1/2 inch from the door jamb opening and about 3/4 from the bottom edge. If you've learned anything about these cars while assembling one or building one, you know that nothing is symmetrical. So, do I fudge this to look the same? Wouldn't take much. And the same distance back, same distance over. I'm gonna go for it. So I will just mark my hole where it falls on the car. The next step in the instructions is, it is now time to punch holes for the lift the dot snaps. If you have the punch pliers, you may leave the top on the car. If you're using the punch or a razor blade, it is recommended to remove the top a safe distance from the car to avoid body damage. My research has revealed that there are two types of punches to make the 5-hole lift the dot hole. One is a pliers type, and then one is a steel block. The pliers type is almost $400. The hit with a hammer type varies between $60 and $80 depending on where you find it. I've got the hit with a hammer type. So the top's got to come off the car and over to the bench for me to nail these first 2 holes. Because I have the strike with a hammer type punch, I have a funny feeling that I'm going to become very adept at installing and removing this top over the next few hours while I am marking and setting the holes for the primary lift the dots. So bear with me. It's going to have to come on and off a couple more times. And I think this reiterates my earlier statement about making sure that your top framework fits together and clicks together easily without a lot of effort. I'm going to put those rubber tubes over the ends of my main bows when I get the main frame disassembled. Pull the hairpin clip, separate the bow. And now it's time to punch some holes. So during my research for this project, I watched several other YouTube videos, mostly for boating or sailmaker type stuff. And that is where I found out how to use and where to procure the punch tool for these lift the dot fasteners. Some of the sites that I watched detailed the edge of the tool, and the edge of the tool is stamped Osborne 4020. So that is the model number of the tool. And this is the box that it came in. An Osborne tool company calls it a curtain fastener hand. So I'm assuming hand operated curtain fastener. So you can look online for one of these. I think I paid about $60 for it, plus shipping. The other thing you need to know about lift the dots is they take 5 holes, one for the stud and 4 small ones for the little prongs. And then on the top of the fastener, see if I can get the glare to work for me, you see the dot where you lift the dot. On the back side, the dot is lined up with the two prongs that are closer together. There's close together and spread apart. The dot wants to go along whatever edge that you want to lift and release the fastener. So on the punch tool, you have corresponding. You have two wide set, center hole, two narrow set. Well, just so I don't have to look every time and make sure that I'm doing it correctly, I marked my tool with a piece of white tape and I put a dot. So the dot is where the dot will go on the fastener. The other thing I gleaned from watching other videos is the procedure for using this tool. And some of them recommend having a thick rubber pad, maybe like a rubber floor mat or something. Others use a block of softwood, pine, or a hunk of 2x4. And then they recommend that you lay a magazine or a piece of cardboard over the top and then set the tool and strike it and punch your holes. So what I have here is a chunk of an old denim work shirt. This is where the buttonholes are. So it's already double thick, and I'm going to fold it in half to make it quadruple thick. And I'm going to punch my very first lift the dot hole. So I'm going to set the tool in place. I have a brass hammer, and let's just see how hard of a smack it takes to punch through this. That was a pretty good hit, and wow, it just popped right through. Now, before I move the fabric and misalign the layers, I'm going to try to get the lift the dot. That just went right through the holes. And I have a beautiful hole. The other thing that I learned by watching other videos is the lift the dots have a backing washer, and it is belled. There's a concave and a convex surface, but one side, see if I can get glare to work for me again, but one side is stamped with the word dot just below the main big hole. And you want to be able to read the word dot, and dot goes to dot. These go together, and then they recommend bending these tabs inward with a needle nose plier that has the jaws taped to keep from scratching. I'm not going to waste one of my fasteners trying this out on a test piece, but that is the procedure. So how easy it is. The other way of doing this is to probably use one of these backing washers and mark the fabric somehow and use a razor blade to cut slits in your material. You have to do this about 25 times. And I think it's well worth the investment of the punch tool, because you get your fabric laid out properly. Speaking of, you get your fabric laid out properly, set your tool in place where you need it to be, firm grip, firm smack, and you have perfect holes. Well, I can't say that. Wasn't a perfect hole because I didn't give it a firm enough smack. You really kind of have to wail on it. There we go. And then as before, I recommend setting the fastener into the holes you've created before you lift the material, because everything stays lined up. Turn it over, and we're ready to put the backing washer on. The tool has a large hole drilled through it, and I'm going to assume that is for clearing out your punchings. And we're good to go. Invest in the tool. Well, like they say, it's time to fish or cut bait. And I've got my top over on the workbench. Here's my marked hole. This is the edge that goes against the door opening. This is the edge around the bottom of the top. So I guess it is time to bite the bullet and punch a hole through an expensive piece of canvas. I've got my dot mark, and you're going to want to lift this way to pop it loose. So I want my dot pointed this way. Another thing to note is that through hole in the tool is parallel to the snap prongs. So I guess the deal here is to line up your main big hole over your mark. See that you are parallel or perpendicular to what you want to punch, and I am not. So I'm going to rotate the tool a little bit. I just came up with another idea. I came up with an idea while I was jigging up for the first take of this, and this through hole in the tool is parallel to where you're going to place your dot, and a Sharpie marker fits right through that hole. So I'll get my tool set up, or my fabric set up over the block, and now I have a means of checking or seeing that I am perpendicular to the edge that I want to be. So I line up the center hole with where I want to punch it. I've got this outrigger, and now I can see that I am perpendicular to that. And I just punched a hole through my top. And before I move it, I am going to set the fastener through the holes. I'm going to take my backing washer with my dot symbol. I have some needle nose pliers where I wrap the tips with some electrical tape, and I'm going to get these prongs started bending in the right direction. And now go back and give them a final squeeze. And there is my very first lift the dot fastener. Now we're on the other side. Again, this is the edge that lines up with the door opening. This is the bottom edge of the top. I want my dot to be on the bottom edge of the top. I will set my center hole over my mark. See that I am perpendicular and parallel. And smack. I'm going to give it another one. There we go. I have my hole. I will get my lift the dot fastener. Sorry, my hand is in the way, but that's how I have to hold it. It's difficult to find the holes for the prongs in heavy material, so that's why I didn't want to move it, because I should be able to push these prongs through into the holes for the 2x4. And now they are in. Get my backing washer. I can read the word dot. Get my tabs started. Sorry if I bumped the camera, but and now give them their final crimp. Some of those upholstery companies sell a tool to fold over these prongs, but this is working out really easily. There is my second lift the dot fastener ever.